So today we're talking about automation basics, as I said. And what automation is it allows you to record, edit, and play volume, mute, pan, other parameters into the track so they will happen automatically during playback. Before automation, the way that you would do any kind of like changes to a track as it was playing is you'd have to do them by hand as you recorded into your tape machine. So you would like have, if you had a track, like a song with a whole bunch of tracks, and you wanted to move like faders, and like let's say in the chorus you wanted the vocals to get louder and the guitars to come down and the drums to come up, something like that, you had to have people actually performing the mix live. So as you would play the track back, you would actually record and perform the mix back. And it was a really kind of a daunting task for some songs, because if you had a song that was more complex and you wanted to do more stuff with it, you'd really have to work hard to make sure you got all those changes correct. So with automation in Pro Tools, Logic, Ableton Live, any of those, now we don't have to worry about that. You can just go ahead and put in your volume changes, your panning, any kind of mutes, stuff like that you want to have happen. You can put that into the track, and then that will just happen every single time. There's a couple differences between the way that like Pro Tools and Logic work and the way that Ableton Live works, and we are going to talk about that especially more once we're talking about Ableton Live. But with Pro Tools, there's a couple things you really have to remember when you are using automation. It's nothing super crazy or totally far out there. It's just you have to keep some things in mind because it's a little bit unintuitive. Okay, so when we're working with automation, we're going to deal with what we call automation lanes. And so if I go into my track here, I'm looking in Pro Tools. If we look over here on the left of each track, here it says waveform. And then down here beneath waveform is just showing me what I'm looking at, right? So if I change it to playlists, it's got all the playlists here, or analysis, like this kind of stuff here. Let me actually make sure that my groups are turned on correctly. Yeah, my drums were not turned on. So if I go here to waveform and I change this to warp, you can see all my warp markers and stuff like that. But if I go down here and I change it to volume, what happens is you get a little line across each track. See this line that's right here? And this is my volume line. This line represents this level right here. So if I move this, you can see the line goes down. See that? Put it back up. So if I just want to move this one here, I can just move that one and I can put it back up. And you can see every time I move it here, the line changes over here. And the reason why that is because I don't have any automation in here yet at all. So what we're going to do is we're going to put some automation on this. So if I wanted to, for example, let's say I wanted to have this kick drum kind of fade up over time, well, I make sure that I'm in my volume lane here. And then I can go over here to this one and I can do stuff to this line here. And I can use my tools up here in different ways. So like the selector tool still works here, or I've got my pencil tool, my grabber tool here, and it can put points in if I click and put points. And then I've got my pencil tool here and I can draw stuff in. So if I go in here, I go to my line tool and I could draw in automation like that. And this is what automation is. And what happens, let me go ahead and put my headphones on so I can hear what's going on. So right now we can hear all the instruments playing at the same time and same level. So if I wanted to fade this up, I can go ahead and click over here. And now and you can hear that kick drum fade in. I could do the same thing with my snare drum as well. Let me go ahead and turn off my overheads. So you can hear how the things fade in there. And I could do any kind of thing with this. I can have it start loud and then come down like this and then fade up like this. And what I'm doing is I'm just using my pencil tool to draw these fades in. And this is just one way to do automation. So you can see here if I do this, let me just do them both kind of the same. So that's how we can draw in our fades and like draw in automation on our volume. So what that's doing is, if I look at this here, if we go over here to our mix window, you can see these will move. They're moving automatically because I have the automation in there. Right? And you can do automation to any kind of track. So it's not just these audio tracks here. I could actually, because all these drums are going through my drum group down here, we talked about that before, I can actually do automation to my drum group down here. So I could take this and I could say, all right, let me just highlight this part here and pull this down. And now everything will fade up. So you can see how this all fades up here. Let me turn this down as well. So you can see, let me turn it up overall. So this line right here, because everything's going through that drum group, this volume here is going to control, it's going to like affect all the drums. We're going to hear all the drums through that one part right there. And this is really the basics of what automation does. The most common automation that you're going to be using is volume automation. So you're going to be doing fades and stuff like that. And this is like really important when you're like leveling up, leveling down, adjusting the volume level of things. This is really important to utilize this a lot, as much as you need to. It comes in very, very, very handy. Okay, so that's one thing we can do, and I'm going to go ahead and delete this automation for now. Put this up to 5 or so. All right, and let's just look at some other automation that we can do. If I look down here, let me do this. I can go to my mutes, and I can like mute or unmute things. So for example, on this one here, if I wanted to mute my kick drum in the beginning, I can just highlight that and mute it. So that's one way to do mutes. That's an automation mute. And then I could also do panning. Let me go ahead and get rid of this. And I'm just double clicking and hitting delete. And if I wanted to pan my kick drum left and right, I can go ahead and pan my kick drum over here to the left and then over here to the right. So you can hear how that works. And if you have headphones on, you can hear that really clearly. If you're listening through your speakers, depending on how your speakers are set up, that's going to be more or less difficult to hear what you're doing. And with the hi-hats, we could do the hi-hats as well. So I can go down here to my hi-hats, because remember, you can pan anything. So I could go over here and I could say, all right, do this, and drag that over like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to hear the hi-hats kind of going from right to left here. Yep. And you can do all sorts of stuff with panning. Now, it used to be that panning was something you really had to do with automation, but these days I don't really use automation on my panning so much. It just kind of depends on what I'm doing. For panning, what I'll do is I'll oftentimes use SoundToy's Pan Man. This is one that I really like a lot. And there's a few different plugins for panning. Okay. What are you doing, iLock? Come on. let's see. Am I crashing things because, oh, there we go. Okay, cool. So yeah, what I would use these days really is a plugin for panning here. And like this, go over here, let's go to Arithmetic Pan, and we'll just do 4 per side. And this will do your panning kind of for you. And this is the way I do a lot of panning these days. I don't really go in and automate it by hand anymore. Although if I really need to be super particular about what my panning is doing, I will do it by hand. But most of the time, you can really do some cool stuff with a plugin like this. And in here, you can see there's like different kinds of rhythms that you can do and rhythm shapes, and you can do customized rhythms, and you can tweak things out. You can see different things down here. It's a really cool plugin for this stuff. Ableton Live has a panning plugin that comes with it. Logic does as well. Pro Tools does not have a panning plugin that comes with it. But even if you are using Ableton Live or Logic, I would really recommend looking into SoundToys Pan Man because it just works so well and you can do some really cool stuff. All right. So that's what's up there. And so that's like just some ideas of what you can do with panning stuff and like not only using automation, but also just panning. All right. So next what we're going to do is let's talk about our sends. So right now we have, let me see. Yeah, I've got my reverb here. And the reverb, if you can see, has like a volume and mute and fade, all that stuff. Same kind of stuff that we have on our track. And so what we can do is we can also use that and do automation on that send there. And all these tracks have the reverb because I've got the reverb plug in all the tracks. So for example, my snare drum, if I want to start off with my snare drum dry, I can just pull that down. Here, let's listen to this. You can hear that snare drum is super, super dry. And if I wanted to have that fade up over time, I can put in a point here and a point over here, and I can have it fade up. So it's a lot of reverb. So you can hear that reverb kind of send fades up and it adds more reverb into the sound, right? So that's a really good way to use that. And you could also do like mute and stuff like that. And this is a way that you'll hear, like, especially with electronic music, people do a lot of builds and they have like the reverbs come in and it gets really big if you're like listening to EDM and stuff like that. And this is what they're doing. They're doing automation on like reverb sends and their effects that they've got. Okay. That's that there. I'm going to go ahead and just put some reverb up like that. And then finally, let's talk about like an effect. Let's go in here. So when we're talking about plugins, we need to make sure plugins are a little bit different. If I look on the track here, if I put, let's go ahead and put a plugin on here. I'm going to put the, oh, that's what's going on. You. So what do you press to add points? So that's a good question. And we're going to come back and talk about it in more detail. But if you're using the grabber tool, you don't have to press anything. You can just press and put a point on there. But I use my smart tool all the time. So I hold down Command or Control, and you can put a point in using that. And you can also hold down Option to kind of get rid of it there. All right, so let's go over here and check out the, let's put a filter on here. What filter do I have that would be a good filter? Oh, well, you just use the one that, the Air Vintage filter. So this Vintage filter that comes with Pro Tools, it's right here, and so I've got this control right here, and I want to control my cutoff and have like a little automation happening here. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here, and I've got to click on this little button here. check this out. This auto button right here, I click on this, and now I have a list of all my plugin parameters that are available with that plugin. And you can see here's my cutoff right here. So I double click this and put it over here and hit go. And now a little green light shows up. Now this little green light that's here, you can see these dots here that don't have any lights on them. That means they're not automatable. This one here has a green light on it that makes you can see it's automatable. Not all plugins have this. This is something only with the plugins that come with Pro Tools. Third-party plugins usually don't show you anything that they're automatable or not. That's a Pro Tools only thing. But what I can do now that I've got this here, if we go to my drum group here, I can go to my Air Vintage filter down here and it shows me my cutoff. It becomes a lane down here. So let me just show you real quick. If I turn this off in here, get rid of it, the vintage filter is no longer down here. Right, I can see here's my driver, AAX is here, but the vintage filter is not there. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this. If I want to see the vintage filter show up, and this is a question that a lot of people have because they're like, Tony, my plugin's not showing up down there. How do I see it? It's because you haven't turned on the automation for that plugin. So you have to make sure you do that. So we go over here, turn on my cutoff, whatever it is I want to use, and you kind of have to know the name of what you're trying to accomplish here. So I'm going to go in here, and now I've got my cutoff frequency here. I'm going to go down here to where it says volume. I'm going to change that to cutoff. And now it's showing my cutoff level. And you see if I turn that knob there, it's adjusting the line on the track. So if I start over here, right? So we can hear how that's working on that right there. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and draw in an automation for that filter. I'm just going to put a point down here. I'm going to put a point over here and have that fade up. Cool. So you hear how that works there. Why is this not? There we go. Some more reverb on the snare. Get a nice 80s snare drum sound. Cool. All right. So you can hear how that works. Let me just play that one more time. And you can see the cutoff knob is actually turning automatically. And that's really the basics of automation. There's not a whole lot more than that. It's just really now a matter of you going and using that in all the different ways that you can think of. So let's just go over some of these notes here again. So just real quick up here, the non-automation lanes for each track are up top, waveform, and above. So that's this stuff over here. So for example, if I go over here where this one says on my track here, all this stuff, blocks, playlists, analysis, warp, and waveform, these are not automation. This is just regular views where you can edit and stuff like that. Everything down here is your automation lanes. Elon says it's the same process for third-party plugins. Absolutely it is, yeah. It's always the same. Different DAWs operate a little bit differently. So when we talk about Ableton Live in a few weeks, we're going to show you how to do this in Ableton Live. It's actually a bit easier in Ableton Live, but this is how Pro Tools does it. And Logic does it basically the same way as Pro Tools. Okay. So over here we have the automation views. These for the plugin, they only appear when you got track sins or plugin parameters auto-enabled. But the volume, mute, and pan will always be there. So these three here, volume, mute, pan, they're always going to be there. You're always going to see those. But the other stuff shows up as needed. So if you have a plugin on there but you don't have anything auto-enabled, then it's not going to show up. You have to auto-enable something. All right. So there are two ways to get automation data into Pro Tools. You can record it in or you can draw it in. And the same thing applies to editing data. So you just saw me drawing it in. And with drawing it, we have a couple different tools here. Let's go over here. So, well, I guess I don't have them written down here. So with drawing stuff in, if I want to draw it in, like let's just stick around with this filter here because it's just easy to hear and easy to see. I can use my grabber tool to put points in, or if I want to subtract points out, see that? I click on that, I hold down Option, and it gets rid of the points. And I can just click it if I've got my grabber tool selected, and I can just put the point in and drag it around and move it like that. So this is how you put points in. I can just like grab it and move it around and say, oh, you know what? I'm going to get rid of this one. I'm going to get rid of this one. Like that kind of stuff there. What I recommend you do though is I recommend you use the Smart tool. And remember the Smart tool is this up here. Just highlight all three of these. Use that Smart tool. So I have a few more things I can do with it. First of all, if I'm using the Smart tool and I want to get rid of some points, I can get rid of the points like this. Let me go ahead and just put this in. I can hold down Option and get rid of that point, or I can hold down Command and add a point. But if I just click on the track, it's not going to add a point in unless I've already got a point there. I can move a point around that I've already got, but I can't do it. So like that. Hi-hats, pan, left to right. Yep, I agree. I'm a big fan of that too. So what we're going to do here is another thing we can do with the Smart tool is I can actually highlight stuff. So if I wanted this filter to kind of start low and get higher, what I can do is I can highlight this, and if I move into the center here, I can click and drag it down like this, and then go over here and delete that point, and now it's just a nice fade up. Right, and I can fade it back down over here. Put that in like that. And it's super easy to do that. If you learn how to use these some of these techniques, it'll make your life a lot quicker and easier for doing this stuff. Right? So pretty cool little tricks there. And then also, we can go ahead and draw these in as well using the pencil tool. And the pencil tool has a couple of different shapes in it. We haven't really talked about the pencil tool too much. But here's my pencil tool here. I've got freehand, I've got line, I've got triangle, square, random, and parabolic and S-curve. These are for tempo changes only. They don't actually affect things like automation. In here, this is really cool. So if I want to do some rhythmic stuff with this, what I do is I set my grid to whatever I want the rhythm to be. So if I want my rhythm to be 8 notes, I set my grid to 8 notes. And then let's put the pencil tool into a square, and I just highlight down here, and now and you can see it's changing that filter, and you can see over here too. And if I want it to go faster, I change the rhythm by changing my grid. So I go over here to 16th notes, and I say, all right, here we go. Here's this. So there we go. You can see we can mess with that over time like that. And there's different shapes in here, like the triangle is a really good one. The square is a good one. See over here. What's happening? What is this? Click workspace updater. No. Right. Let me turn on my grid here so it locks it into the grid more directly. There we go. So we can do that kind of stuff there. If I wanted to fade over time, like slower, put this in, fade that. This used to be the type of thing that actually only Pro Tools had, was this pencil tool, but Ableton Live did add automation shapes into Live 10 when they released it. You have to access them a bit differently, but they are in there, which is pretty cool. So that's our pencil tool and how we use the pencil tool. And if I want to get rid of this automation here, what I do is I just highlight it and I hit delete, and it's as easy as that. You can also copy the automation. So for example, if I have 2 bars that I really like these 2 bars here, I can just highlight it and hit Command D or Control D, and it will duplicate it over like this. Or if I wanted to, I can Command C and then hit Command V to paste it in where I want it to go in. Like that. And there we go. Cool. All right. So that's that's like pretty much automation right there. But if I wanted to play it in, if I wanted to take this and control it with a controller or use my mouse to kind of perform the automation, a couple of ways we can do that here. So first of all, I'm going to pull this up so I can see my plugin here. And over here, what I'm going to do is, see this says read right here? If I click on this, this is my automation and how the computer is dealing with the automation, how the program is dealing with the automation. So I've got off, read, touch, latch, write, all these things here. So what I'm going to do is I can change this to touch, latch, or write, something like that. And I can perform that automation in. I can perform this cutoff here. So for example, we can see, whoops, not that one, this one. These are the different modes. Off, it just means the automation is turned off. There's no automation that's going to do anything. Read follows the Pro Tools automation data that's written on the track. Touch and latch are very similar. Touch only records the parameter that you are touching. When you stop touching it, it stops recording that parameter and just goes back to the original automation. And then latch records the parameter you are touching, but it continues recording. And I'm going to show you examples of this in just a second. And then write mode records all available parameters simultaneously. I don't recommend using write mode very often unless you really want to overwrite everything, because even automation parameters that you're not touching will get written in. And I'll kind of explain that a little bit, but this is the kind of thing where you're going to understand it more as you work with it and you just keep trying it. So check this out. System, you're about to get booted, dude. Keep asking some weird questions, man. It's Pro Tools. All right. So in here, if I go in here, I want to, let's say I want to do my automation recorded in here. So I'm going to go over here to this, and I'm going to use touch mode. Change that to touch mode, and you'll see that when I do that, it turns red here, and also this little dot that was next to my cutoff turns red. Now, once again, this is something that's not in a third-party plugin. It's just in these plugins that come with Pro Tools here. So if I record this in, you can see it's changing stuff as I go. So you can record this in. And now you can see all this stuff that I just played is all in here. All that stuff I just did. And if I wanted to replay that in, I can start from anywhere on here, and it's still in touch mode. I can change it to latch mode. I could go over here. I could start from here. Oops. There we go. And you can see it's playing all my automation, but the second I touch it and I move it, it records new automation over that. Like that. So I just recorded it over the automation. Now, keep in mind when you're doing this, I didn't hit the record button up here. You don't have to hit record in Pro Tools. you're just recording on the track the automation. You're not recording audio or MIDI or anything like that. So you don't have to hit that record button. That record button is really only for audio or MIDI recording. If you're just doing automation, it's just going to be, you just set the track up for recording the automation and you're good to go. So here's touch versus latch, because touch versus latch are very similar in how they work, but they have to do with after you let go of that parameter, what happens next. So for example, if I'm using touch mode, I've got my original automation in blue here. When I start recording, the original automation is overwritten by the new data if I'm actually touching it. I've got my mouse down on it, I'm touching it, and it's going to record that new automation. But as soon as I let go of the mouse, it's going to go back to the previously recorded automation data. So that looks like this. If I go in here, let's say I've got touch mode here, and just kind of pay attention to this line down here. So I hit go, start from over here. And you can see I'm touching it here. You can see that red line is there. The red line's appearing on my screen. Now if I let go, it's following this line again here. It's doing the automation data. And if I touch it again, it starts recording, and you can see everywhere it was recording because it's got a little red line in there. And now it just put in that automation that I just recorded. If I use latch mode, latch overwrites the original data until you stop playback. So what happens is with latch mode, it's always going to be recording the data after you touch it, but it's going to continue in a straight line. So for example, if I start here and it does this, it's recording it, and then when I let go, it just continues in a straight line here. So go over here to latch mode, and now I'm going to put some automation data in. And when I let go, what happens is it keeps recording in a straight line like this. And then I go back and I record some more. And it's recording in a straight line again. So latch mode latches on to the last automation that you were recording and then continues from that point. Latch mode is really useful if you're trying to search for the right level of something or the right setting for something and you want to record it in, and then you want to get it there and you're like, okay, that's where I want it to be, and you've already got automation data in there. Then you just go ahead and use latch mode, you mess around with it until you find it, and then you let go, and then you can use that to kind of set your everything else. So it's really useful, but most of the time I use touch mode if I've already got previously recorded automation data in there, because I don't want to record over my previous automation. Usually I just want to tweak something or mess with it a little bit. So I can use touch mode for that. So one setup that I think is really useful for y'all in Pro Tools here, after write pass, switch to touch, the default is latch. I think that's really important in Pro Tools. It's funny because Logic, the default mode, after you do a write pass, it switches to touch. In Pro Tools, it switches to latch. So let me just show you what that looks like here. Preferences. And over here, automation. Where's my automation? Editing. Automation here, yeah. So after write pass, switch to, the default is latch. And I actually changed this to touch. I recommend changing this to touch in your preferences. It's under mixing, and then after write pass, switch to touch. Right over here on the right-hand side. I recommend changing that because I think for me personally, touch mode is more useful than latch mode. And it's just interesting the kind of the way that different programs set this up. Like I said, Logic, the default is touch mode. Pro Tools, the default is latch mode. And I'm not really sure why the difference is there, but so you got that there. All right. Now let's take a listen to, let's take a look at what write mode does. We haven't really talked about write mode yet. Write mode, it actually writes everything that's automatable. So for example, over here, volume, mute, pan left, pan right, and filter, these things here are all automation lanes, and they're all parameters that can be automated. And so what we're going to do is when I use write mode, it's actually going to automate all those things. Let me just go over here and show you. So let me just make sure about something here. Automation window. Yeah, all right, cool. So I'm just going to leave this on. I'm going to put this right up here for now. And what I'm going to do is set up a 2-bar loop. And I'm going to go ahead and put it in write mode and put this up, pull this up here so I can do some parameter changes. And let's just see what happens. Now what you'll notice is that when it went through the loop and it came back around, it switched out of write mode and into touch mode. That's because in write mode, everything is being overwritten all the time. So write mode is the most destructive. And if you want to do some broad changes to things and you want to set up like a sound, then write mode is really useful. But most of the time, I don't recommend using write mode. I recommend using touch or latch. And what happens is when you do a loop, in order for Pro Tools to protect your automation data that you just recorded, it switches from write mode into touch or latch mode, whatever you set in that preference setting we just talked about. So we want to set that up there. And here, just so you can see what I'm talking about, I was recording my touch, but if I go to volume, mute, pan, see how they're all like yellow orange right now? That's because they all have automation data on them. Now, the automation data they have is not much. It's just a dot right here. But that dot is the automation data for that track. Now, this brings us up to another point here with Pro Tools, and it's the same in Logic. When you're using Pro Tools or Logic, automation is king. That's in the notes right here. In Pro Tools, automation is king. If you have any automation data on a track, that parameter is no longer editable unless you edit the automation data itself. So what does that mean? That means that now that I have this one point of volume automation, just one point here, but watch what happens if I try to adjust my fader here. Whoops, hold on a second, that's not what I wanted to do. Take it off of touch. I'm going to put it back into read mode here. Now, because it has a point, I messed it up. Hold on a second. Okay, hold on a second. Let me do this again. We went too far. Hold on, I went to a place where it's not. Hold on a second. Let's do this. Put it back in write mode. Record some stuff in. All right, there we go. Yeah, because I hit undo and it undid like everything I did and it wouldn't get it back for some reason. So now I'm in read mode and check this out. I've got my one dot right here. See that point? Well, that point, what it does is it makes it so when I move this, it's going to go back to that point. I can't let go and have it stay there because automation is king. And once you have one point of automation on a track, it's gonna like lock it into that automation. So in order for me to change my volume now, I would actually have to edit the whole everything. I have to go through and edit all the stuff. And that can be kind of a pain there. So that's why I don't really use write mode very often, because then everything becomes automated and you have to kind of wrestle with it a bit differently. So on here, if I wanted to get rid of that automation point, I have to go in here and double click and hit delete. And now it gets rid of that automation point. This is a real common kind of blunder that people make. Especially younger producers when they're using stuff for the first time. They're like, I wrote in some automation and now I don't have control over my volume anymore. I want to change the volume on my drums and I don't have control over it. So what do? Well, you either get rid, if you're not using the automation for that lane, I would just get rid of it by highlighting and hitting delete. Or you can right your level in. So for example, if I just want everything to be like this level here, I can do that, and it will fade up over here at the end. And then so Rondell says, given that automation is king, what stage of production engineering do you recommend doing automation? Do automation whenever you can. Just remember that when you do it, you're gonna have to make change, like especially for volume, it gets kind of annoying because I always find that I'm messing with my volume into the mix. I might tweak the volume a little bit here and there. And if you have automation on it, then you're gonna have to like go into the automation and do it there. It's not impossible, it's just a little bit annoying. There is a workaround for it though. With logic, we have what we call relative automation and I guess absolute automation. And in Pro Tools, we don't have that. That's a version of Pro Tools Ultra. They do have that in Pro Tools Ultra, but regular home version of Pro Tools that we have does not have this feature. So the workaround is what I always do is if I'm going to do volume automation, I don't actually do my volume automation on the volume lane. What I do is I'll put in a multi-mono other trim, and I will do my volume automation on that trim plugin here. So here's my trim plugin. I go over here to my automation, click on this, and I go to my gain and hit OK. Now you can see it's turned green here. So any volume automation I want to do on my drums, I would do it on here. And the reason why is because if I wanted these to like fade up to here. Oh wait, that's the wrong one. Here, this one here, trim. Make sure I'm on the right lane here. Here we go, gain. Right, so you can hear it's fading up. Bring that up to 0. Right, so we got this here. And if I wanted to then change my level of my drums overall, I can just grab my fader and just adjust that level of the drums overall. Because I've got the automation on this trim plugin here. And now if I want to still work with the mix on my drums as a whole, I use the volume fader here. And you can do it either way. You can do the automation on your fader and then use the trim plugin to adjust your volume level. But I recommend doing it with the trim plugin. And that way, your faders, I don't really like it when my faders are moving all over the place. I used to like it. I used to think it was really cool looking, but then I kind of got over it. I'm just like, you know what? I want to use my faders to set my levels, and any kind of like automation, I want to have it more in the background. So I could turn my drums up overall. Oh wait, I've got my stuff, still got like a, get rid of this one. There we go. Turn my drums up overall. And now my drums are just louder. Or if I want my drums to be softer, they're still fading, but the fade is within this overall level of stuff. So I recommend using the trim plugin for doing actual fades and stuff like that if you want to control your volume level for things. And the trim plugin is, make sure you put that last. Actually, and Rondell, this answers your question. Does the trim plugin affect the inserts such as compressors? And the answer is, it depends on where you have it in the signal flow. If I put my trim plugin up here, then yes, if you put the trim plugin first, because remember, compressors are affected by how much input you have into the signal. But if I put my trim plugin at the end, then all the compression's happening on the sound itself, and the trim plugin is just like turning the volume up and down on everything. So always put your trim plugin last. You always want the trim plugin to be at the very end of everything, because the trim plugin shouldn't be affecting your tone or your sound. So if I want like a sound that's like super distorted, I'm gonna put a plugin on that's gonna distort it and drive it into it. Here, let me just show you what I mean by this. So here, let's, here, I'm gonna bypass this one. Okay, so, and we're gonna fade this up a little bit more over time. I'll do a 4-bar loop here. Here's my trim gain. I'm gonna actually fade this up a little bit differently. I'm gonna go ahead and put a point here, and I'll put a point over here. So it'll fade up for 2 bars. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put a distortion plugin on here. Harmonic. Let's put in the air distortion. And in here, if I put this drive up here like this, all right, so you can hear, even when it's softer down here like this, it's still distorted. But if I put the trim plugin in front of the distortion plugin, you hear how it was not distorted here in the beginning. It was clean. But then once we hit that trim level, because the volume level is being affected going into the distortion, which affects our distortion. And now you can hear it's like super distorted there. So you always want to have the trim plugin after, because if I want my drums to be distorted, I usually, like, that's the choice I'm making. It's like a creative choice that I'm making. So I want that drums to have that color of distortion. And so I don't want the level of the drums to change the distortion color. The sound of the distortion, I don't want that to change. I want that to stay the same. So we're gonna put the trim plugin always last. Awesome. Yeah, and that changes for compression, stuff like that. It's just distortion is much easier to hear than compression. Compression can be a little bit difficult to hear for people, so that's why I use distortion as an example there. All right, so this is like a little, I already mentioned this before, but you can copy, paste, or duplicate automation data. Double click with the select tool to select all the automation data within a clip or within a section, and then triple click to select it for the whole entire track. So double click will just do it within a clip, triple click will do it within the whole track. Then there's an automation window. Use this window to turn automation writing off for certain parameters. So for example, if I wanted to not write my volume data, I can just turn it off right there. And so this allows you to have some control over what your write automation is doing. I don't really use this. I do use it sometimes, but not that much, just because I don't like to worry about it. So that's why I use that trim plugin. I feel like it's a little bit easier to deal with the trim plugin. Sorry, that's why I don't use write mode very much. I just kind of automate in. But I'm going to show you a really cool trick here with this. But before I show you that trick, I want to show you a couple of other tricks. The red, if it's red, the parameter can be written. So see how this one's red here? That means the parameter can be written in. It's going to write in my plugin parameters, but like volume, pan, mute, these will not be written in. So I can turn those off. And if you want to, you can just leave those off most of the time. You can still write the parameter in. It's just, this is for when you're recording stuff. All right, a couple tips and tricks. Always insert the first and last automation points and then the adjustment point. So for example, if I have my level here, my trim level, and I wanted my drums, I wanted this to be like kind of a fade or something like that. What I'm going to do is I recommend putting your first and last point. So if I'm right here, let me turn this off. If I'm right here and I want to put like a little fade, well, I know that my level is really good where it is right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in my point, my like destination point first. So I put that in right there, and I'm going to put in my start point. And then I'm going to make any adjustments. in the middle here. The reason why I do that is because if I put in my destination point here, if I put a point there to lock it in place, I know I'm coming back to the right place. And that's going to be very useful for stuff. So for example, if I do it the other way, like most people, they'll come in and they'll put the point in here, and they'll go back and they'll try to put this back to where it was, but that can be really tricky, and then I've wasted time kind of trying to dial that in to where I wanted it to be. But if I go ahead and put the points in here and here, like this, it works out. Now, a faster way to do this is if you're using your Smart tool, I'm just going to highlight it, pull it down, and then hold down Option and click on the last one over here. And now, and that's much easier for dealing with this stuff like this. Just pull it down, get rid of this last one here, and now we're good to go. And this is just like a little trick that I learned from just doing this for so many years, doing automation stuff and just kind of learning how to work faster. So it's not like something you need to do, it's just something that I recommend you do so you can save yourself some time and energy. This one here says, do your volume automation with the trim plugin, not on the track fader. Put the trim plugin at the end of your effect chain. We just talked about that. Auto enable the claw. Okay, so this is like a cool thing for plugins that come with Pro Tools. So for example, if I go back over here to my vintage filter, let me get rid of this automation. In here, get rid of that. So if I want to automate this on first-party plugins, the ones that come with Pro Tools, you can use the claw, Control, Option, and Command, or Control, Alt, and whatever, Windows key. And if I hold that down and I click on it, this little box pops up and it says Enable Automation for Cutoff. And so now I can just select that, and it automatically enables that for that one right there. If I have a third-party plugin in here, I'm pretty sure with a third-party plugin it doesn't work the same way. So if I go in here and I say, let's use the Devil Lock from Sound Toys. So in here I only have two parameters. Over here, bypass, crunch, and crush, 3 parameters. And if I click on this one with my claw, oh, it does do it. Okay, so maybe it's either by the company. Let's try a different plugin here. And that's pretty useful. It didn't used to do that. And it may be case by case by the company. Like, let's look at a Native Instruments plugin here. Let's use driver. Okay, it's working. Okay, great. So I guess certain companies have it. Maybe they all do. If I click on it, Enable Automation for Resonance, so that means I don't have to go in here and click around and stuff. And you can see this one here actually puts a little green box around it. That's a Native Instruments thing that shows me what's automatable. And I can just hold down the claw and click it again to get rid of it. You can't pass your 201 exam. I'm sorry. Yeah, I actually don't know what's on that exam. So here's this one here. My filter frequency. This one's got a crazy resonance on it. It's really cool. I actually really like this plugin a lot. So that's that one there. That's the claw. Let's see what else we got here. Option and then minus key toggles the automation view and edit window. That's also on the Windows. It's Alt. So if I'm clicking on a track and I want to see my automation stuff, it just kind of clicks through this. Lets me see that here. Oh, yeah, I don't know. Let's see here. Enable automation for all parameters. Set the plugin. Okay, so this is a really cool little technique here I'm going to show you real quick because everything else I've covered. So here, let me put a special plugin on here. Get rid of this. These ones here. I'm going to just get rid of this trim plugin because I don't really need it. And I'm going to put the sci-fi plugin. The reason why I'm using sci-fi is because it works really well. Modulation for this example. Is it modulation? Wait, where is it? Here it is, sci-fi. So this plugin here has some really interesting presets. They kind of do weird sounds. So we'll use these ones here. And what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to put this back into the default mode, factory default, which isn't anything. I'm just going to take a little snapshot of that. And what I mean by snapshot means that I'm basically going to record the parameters into Pro Tools automation lane. So I go over here and I click on all these, and I can just like put them all over here on the right like that. Or I can hold down my claw and click on automation button, and it just turns them all into automatable. So you want all your parameters to be automatable. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn off the bypass. I don't want that one. I don't need that one to be automatable. There we go. Make sure in your automation window here, and that was just under window automation, that we have the volume, pan, mute, all that stuff turned off, because we're going to use write mode for this. So all we want to write into is the plugin parameter there. And now I'm going to go ahead and capture. I'm going to make a little loop. Let's do a little loop right here. And I'm going to capture these settings. And I just do that by hitting write mode and just hit play. And now there's nothing even there, it's just silence there. But if I go look, you can see there's like a little point. That little point right there is what I just captured. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here to my loops. I'm going to loop this section here. And I'm going to change this. I'm going to turn on off to find my settings that I want. And I'm going to use the bad radio ones. Right, I'm going to record these settings in. So I'm going to go over here to write mode again and hit play. And there we go. Now it's written those settings in. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the next bar, or wherever I want to make that change. Let's do this. Put it right there. And I'm going to go ahead and put it back in write mode. Let's put it in read mode real quick. Hey, come on. I'm avoiding the end in the beginning just so I don't get that downbeat. There we go. So I'm going to record that in. Write mode, go. Awesome. And then I'm going to go over here to the next bar. And put this into bad radio 3. There we go. Hit record, write mode. Come on. Hello. All right, so now I've got those three settings, and if I go back here and hit play, what's going to happen is on each bar, it's going to flip those settings, and you'll see all that stuff happening right over here. And it goes back to the beginning there. So if I go ahead and there we go. And I play these. And you can see it's changing right there. Right? So this is a really like, you know, interesting way to use this. Something's going on here with this. And that's what we do. Now, once you've written all that stuff in, if you want to like kind of not worry about it anymore, what you do is you hit the Save button over here, and it will do that for you. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording there because that's pretty much the end of our stuff.